Welcome to Minerva Meets. I'm your host, Sonal Chandler, and this is episode 21. You might recall, if you've been following the podcast, that I had Mike Wilson from Interlink on a couple of episodes before, and we talked about Microsoft Copilot. I've got so many questions following that episode that I had to bring on somebody else to help me really unpack a little bit beyond just the high-level Microsoft Copilot stuff. And today, what I'd like to really do is dive into how it actually gets implemented. Now, as a reminder, Copilot is really built into all the familiar tools that we use every day: Word, Excel, Outlook. But, how do you really go from just turning it on to really rolling it out successfully within an organization? And so to help me unpack all of this, I've asked Rachael Narrow. Did I pronounce that correctly? All right, perfect. From Interlink Cloud Advisors. So she and Mike work together, who's spent some time in the trenches. She helps clients plan, deploy, and really get value out of Copilot. So if you're curious about how to implement Microsoft Copilot, this episode is for you. Welcome to the show, Rachael. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Can you please tell us a little bit about yourself and some background and how you got started with being a Copilot expert?
Sure. So currently at Interlink Cloud Advisors, I lead up the employee engagement and productivity practice, which I know is a mouthful. But essentially, it's all things end user facing when it comes to Microsoft technology. So in addition to Copilot, my team supports related technologies like SharePoint, Teams, Power Platform, Microsoft Viva, which is very helpful for rollout and adoption. But we also do all of the change management and user adoption activities. And I think that's probably one thing we'll probably talk about over and over again in our discussion today, and how, Copilot is partially technical readiness, but the human change element is also really important. So by way of my background, I've been over 25 years in IT, software, and consulting. I've been working in a variety of different industries. I've always had a particular focus on business intelligence, digital transformation, and now more recently in the past few years, Microsoft and AI and Copilot. I also have a master's in management and organizational behavior and a PhD in organization development. So that really helps me bring together kind of both that technology side as well as the people side for, digital transformation. Again, is very much about human change in addition to the implementation of the technology.
I love it. You're like a jack of all trades, because that mixture of just understanding human behavior and technology and putting that together, I feel like that's a great combo. All right, well, let's dive in here. There's a lot of hype around Copilot, right? There's confusion. There's, oh my gosh, it's the greatest thing since sliced bread. Let's get grounded in your perspective. And how do you think that a business should think about Copilot and what it actually is?
Yeah, I think there's some thoughts in the market where people say this is a very expensive chatbot. It is definitely not that. It really is, your embedded virtual AI assistant across all of the Microsoft applications and tools, where it can really help you enhance your productivity and creativity in all of your day-to-day tasks. So it really is something that is your strategic partner in your day, and not just thinking of something where you're chatting and it's, just helping you with these one-off solutions. It's something you can really use end to end, start to finish in your workday.
Yeah, well, I think that's super helpful. I was thinking about, what are some of the misconceptions? And you just mentioned that people think that it's just a really smart chatbot. What are some other misconceptions that you're hearing about or seeing out there?
Yeah, I think kind of like you mentioned in the beginning of the kind of introduction for this, I think a lot of people think it's plug and play. While you just turn on your Copilot licenses and it will start to show up in your Office applications, there are some steps for readiness, not only for your environment and for your users. On the users, I think also both from a user perspective and maybe a management perspective, people think it can actually replace people, where it's really meant to augment the human. So, those people are still valuable. At the end of the day, they're still the knowledge experts, the decision makers that leverage Copilot and use what it brings to the table to be more successful in their tasks. I also think in relation to the rollout and adoption piece, we have worked with some organizations that have come to us and said, well, we turned it on and we told people to just play with it, and I figured they'd get it. Not so much the case. You kind of do need to learn some of the best practices when it comes to prompting, and asking your Copilot how to help you with tasks, but also understanding like in a day in your life, how can I successfully use it? Like, not just Copilot can create a PowerPoint presentation, but it can help you, prepare for that meeting, put that agenda together, take that agenda and create a PowerPoint to guide your conversation, give you kind of all
Mhm.
things around that process. So it's more than just like, how does it work in the office tools, but comprehensively, how can I leverage that Copilot strategically as well?
Yeah, and I love that you mentioned that the piece about fear because I can't tell you how many times whenever I do a podcast or a talk or I get the question of, oh my gosh, is AI going to be taking my job and all of this stuff? And so it's really important to remind individuals that no, that's not what this is. That's not what we're talking about. And yeah, there are probably some jobs that are going to be replaced at some point, but right now with Copilot, it's really that smart assistant that's going to really make your day more productive, if you will.
Yeah. And there is some upskilling that goes along with that, where,
Right.
then you can repurpose that time for what you actually strategically should be doing. So, and kind of instead of, creating that document and pushing that paper, you can actually be providing more of that value add to your client or your customer or for that product and service.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Are there specific types of departments or areas within an organization that you see benefit more or better than others?
I would say multiple functional areas do benefit from Copilot. I'll say all of your heavy Office 365 users definitely get value because they're already using those tools. So then now they can leverage Copilot more strategically to do the type of activities that they were using with those tools. Anybody who's doing a lot of repetitive tasks, like hosting meetings, having to send out those meeting minutes after, the AI
Right.
recap is a huge feature that everyone absolutely loves when it comes to Copilot. We see, salespeople using that use case a lot. PMO does a great job using that to recap meetings and send out their different types of reports. We see a lot of use in HR for, again, repetitive tasks like onboarding or putting those offer letters together for new employees, or even handling the yearly annual benefits management, which is
Oh my gosh, yes.
I'll say now too, though, Copilot or Microsoft had just released recently some new agents as part of their Copilot chat,
Mhm.
analyst and researcher. And for people that do those types of functions within an organization, the deep research and knowledge that that is bringing is huge and a big game changer. You can start your researcher on a task, go have a cup of coffee or a cup of tea, come back, and you've done all the heavy lifting for you. So a lot of those time consuming and repetitive tasks, it's really useful for those. As I'll say too, for people like in marketing, for creating content and creating images, also a really helpful assistant for that too.
Yeah, and I love that you mentioned some of those use cases because it just validates my usage of AI in general. So I'm like, okay, I'm doing the right thing.
Yeah, for sure.
So let's talk about. So I know that I think Interlink has a framework of these five key areas that of how to prepare for Copilot. And I'd love for us to kind of walk through that. And the first one is information management and governance. Let's talk a little bit about data quality and the impact on the implementation.
Yeah, data quality is foundational to a good Copilot experience. As I kind of mentioned in the beginning, my background is in business intelligence, and your reports and dashboards are only as good as the data that you're using with them. Copilot is the same. It likes well curated content. So again, I think of my Copilot as my virtual assistant and can parallel that to a physical assistant. So if
Mhm.
I go ask my assistant to, I'm working on a report, could you go into my office and get me some files related to this? If I have a really messy desk with a whole bunch of folders
Right.
all over the place and like shoved in drawers and in file cabinets and this and that, you're not going to find the right information. You might bring back old information. You might bring back the wrong information. So data quality is really important when it comes to Copilot. Again, that well curated content makes it easier for it to assist you faster and more effectively.
Yeah, I love that analogy, by the way. I might have to steal that from you. The next piece of this framework talks about security and access controls. And I know a lot of HR folks get a little worried about people getting access to, sensitive documents. So let's talk a little bit about that.
I will extend my analogy out then further. So while they're in your office, you forgot to lock the payroll drawer. And
Oof.
now Copilot sees someone's name on it that's similar to the task it's been asked to do. And it goes, yoink, I'm going to bring this file along. So again, that similarly, like security is really important to make sure, that you have information locked down to the right individuals, that you use labels where appropriate. Copilot's not going to create holes in your security infrastructure, but it can find things that are already issues. So for example, by habit, you can be a little lazy as users. And, if you're used to sharing out OneDrive content, let's say, and you don't actually like name the person you're sharing it to, I share it to anyone that has a link. Well, if that person then shares that link with 2 of their friends and 5 of their friends, now you think only one person has that, but everybody has that.
Yeah.
Well, if they all have Copilot, in theory, they all could have access to that OneDrive file. So going through and kind of doing like a, data assessment just to check on the security and labeling and permissioning in your environment is definitely like a recommended task is, good preparation just to, make sure nothing's exposed that shouldn't be exposed to end users.
Isn't there a tool, the name is escaping me, where you can kind of run to sort of see where some of those loopholes might be?
Yeah. So actually, one of the things that Microsoft did to be very helpful for IT and the technical side of the house, especially for smaller businesses, is they've created very nice admin centers. There is SharePoint Advanced Management. So there's one area in there where you can actually run reports and look for data access issues. You can look for those types of exposures. And while you're in that portal, then you can also put policies and rules in place to lock things down. I can similarly see some of those types of things via Microsoft Purview. And it also has data security posture management for AI. So there's some new specialized tooling in there related to AI specifically. And then we have our Copilot Control Center, which is a whole other area as well. So there's plenty of areas where we can go uncover that information and then lock it down if needed while we're in there doing that assessment and review.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's super helpful. And I'm going to have you back for another episode just to kind of talk a little bit more about that. So I'm going to earmark that for us to come back to at some point. The next part of the framework talks about change management. And I know just based on your background and that nice marriage between technology and organizational behavior, let's talk a little bit about what you're seeing there.
Yeah, and I think, like I mentioned, there's 2 paths we work with customers on for Copilot implementation. There's the technical readiness piece, which we were already discussing, which is really important, but which I also feel organizations are usually really comfortable with. We put a project manager, we outline the steps, we do the reviews, and we do the assessments. It's the human change piece that's a little bit more complicated. One, it's also more than just training. So it's really understanding our users and kind of where they're at, meeting them where they're at and providing them with the right tools and resources for whatever their needs. So, as you mentioned, we have various types of resistance to change. Some people are afraid of it. So, we have to do things to make them comfortable with, using it, but also that we're not replacing their roles. In some cases, it's just building up a habit. It takes that 21 days to build a new habit. And, from a change management standpoint, this is definitely not a one and done. We roll out Copilot, do communications, do an initial training, and then, step away and hopefully the users are good for a couple reasons. One reason is we need to make it sticky. It's interesting that often people aren't upset with the change. Like you look at the end result of running that marathon or doing whatever you're doing. Nobody's arguing with the end result. It's that sticky, messy transitional part that's hard. So we need to stay in there as change managers kind of throughout that whole process. But also as we're trying to do that, we have a moving target because Copilot keeps changing because they keep rolling. So there is an initial initiation to getting all that going. But there's care and feeding that needs to happen over time with your Copilot rollout and adoption, whether that's, even just your pilot group, but, thinking more broader organizationally. So it's an ongoing effort and, you have to come up with it. So.
And, what I really appreciate about this is the fact that an organization as large as Interlink, as well as a company as small as Minerva, that we're actually addressing change management, right? And I think that so often organizations try to like throw a technology in. We've bought this great new product, but then there's no one there to help you adopt it. So then there's these questions of like, well, why aren't we moving faster? Why aren't things happening? Well, it's because we don't know how to use it. And that's it's almost like a recipe for failure to adopt.
And
Yeah.
we also have, like, again, different people at different stages. I'm finding a lot of the newer workers coming out of college, they've been using AI in class.
Yes.
They're not as hesitant about it. If
Mhm.
it, and also that's a thing, they might be bringing their own AI. So having a
Right.
secure tool like
Yes.
Copilot is also, and then we do have workers that, are scared of it. So we just need, again, meet them kind of where we're at and provide some of the right resources for their needs as well. And I think involving those users, there's something we always see in the field of change, and that everything we do is an intervention. By just
Mhm.
bringing them to the table and like letting their voices be heard, usually then they are more open to the change because they feel like they're part of the process.
Yes, I love that. And that's a great segue into the next piece of the framework, which is training in AI literacy, which is what I think you were just referring to.
Yeah, I'd say, and for some people also, this is a bit of an unlearning because we have been trained to use keywords to go find information on the web. With
Right.
Pilot, again, you need to think of it like your virtual assistant. So it'd be just like us having a conversation or me asking a physical assistant to help me with a task, or a friend or a colleague.
Mhm.
There are best practices with prompting where you need to kind of coach and ask Copilot to assist you and give it context around what your goals are, what type of information you want it to use. By nature, Copilot's going to go out and find anything and everything, like that, all those folders in my office. If
Mm.
I only want it to use specific content, I need to kind of tell it, as well as, any personas, or, what I want the output to look like. So there is a little bit of an art and crafting to prompting. I think people too, by nature, if Copilot or any AI tool doesn't necessarily give you the right results, we tend to like X out the box and start over.
Mhm.
Copilot, it's better to keep that conversation going where you say, okay, you didn't do that exactly how I wanted you to do it. Now take what we did, let's learn from it, and, refine that prompt. It's also, Copilot's great also where you can just ask it how it can help you. And but I think the most important thing we've learned in the several years we've been working in the trenches with Microsoft on this and our customers is generic training doesn't help. Uh,
Right.
with generic, a primer session, yes. From there, it needs to be relatable to their work, their industry, their day to day, using prompts that are like meaningful and helpful, like in showing the illustration for they can walk away and see actionably what they can use it for.
Mhm.
That's been a game changer for many customers, especially the ones who come to us and they're like, oh, we're playing around with this, it's not going great. Sit down and do some focus groups and figure out, okay, what are you doing and where are the opportunities for AI? And then showing them Copilot makes a big difference.
Thank you for sharing that, because my next question to you was going to be about, well, how can, if somebody has just implemented it, should they play around with it for a little bit before they, just to kind of understand it, and then say, okay, well, now here's the things that I do on a daily basis. How do I marry the two?
Yeah, I think the other thing that's really helpful is with Microsoft's Copilot, in every tool, there's prompt guides. So
Mhm.
it gives you a little coaching on here's what I can do, and you can start trying that out. There's actually an entire prompt library where you can put in your role, your persona, the tool you're trying to use, and it'll also, again, give you kind of some sample prompts. So kind of no wrong way to get started. I think, that more tailored kind of customized prompting gets a little bit more value, but
Yeah.
your way of getting started with it, and getting in the trenches a little bit to learn it, especially if there are people who have used other AI tools, many of those people are successful in kind of adapting into the Copilot world because they're used to tooling working like that already and how to have conversation.
Yeah. And yes, you have to get your hands wet. Get your hands, just start experimenting, right? And you'll learn so much more from that. This last piece of the framework is something that I always get bogged down in, which is why I really wanted us to talk about it, is the licensing and technical setup. I feel like it's always a confusing mystery.
Right.
Please dispel this for me.
Oh, so yes, it can that all be very confusing. Microsoft, I joke directly to Microsoft about this, that they've created this lovely generative AI, but then they called everything Copilot.
Yes.
So there are various categories of Copilots. with people that have enterprise licensing with Microsoft already, everyone gets access to Copilot chat. And this allows you to have a secure AI experience on the web. You can actually upload content from your tenant, your environment, if you'd like that as well to use that. But it is as long as you're signed in with your Microsoft credentials for your company, you have a secure experience to chat with that content. Nothing's leaving your tenant, nothing's training a large language model, but it is captured for e-discovery if that's ever needed in the future. So that's also
Sure. Yeah.
now, then there is the paid $30 user a month, where you pay for a year. Microsoft 365 Copilot, that's the Copilot that's then available to you in the Office applications. So that Copilot knows everything about you as a Microsoft 365 user. So it's your emails, your meetings, your chat, those OneDrive files, your SharePoint files, anything that's online. So if you have files that are in a SharePoint on-prem or being E drive, it doesn't know those. So that extends that experience out. That also does give you access to both of them, kind of do in different paid ways, to agents. So there's a Copilot Studio where we can create agentic experiences that has separate licensing for it.
Yeah.
But those are nice because let's say you've started with Copilot Chat, the free, but you do have some use cases, for example, like an HR self-service, where you want to give an AI experience where people can go look up their PTO or procedures. I can create a customized Copilot agent that just focuses on that content that everybody in the organization can use without paying for that extra licensing. But yes, so there's some, and there's other Copilots out there as well, and different security centers and things. But yes, there's some that kind of comes along with licensing that you already have. And then there's that paid version. There's also an at-home personal version, but that doesn't obviously connect into, the content that you have.
Sure. Yeah. Oh, super helpful. And on Interlink's website, they've got a lot of cheat sheets there that help you understand the difference. So, I can link to those in our show notes as well.
Yeah.
So let's kind of bring it to reality a little of, how are organizations actually putting Copilot to work? What are some, kind of, this is a repetitive question, but because we mentioned earlier, like, what are some of the most common use cases that you're seeing people implement?
Yeah, I'll say definitely the meeting recaps, the AI recap notes, I think that's huge for anybody in that host meetings, where, those are so nice. Not only, and I've become so lazy where I'm so used to the here up there, I'm like, oh my gosh, I still do take the physical notes just in case.
Yes.
It's so nice because you can be present in a meeting and not have to worry about all the typing. Like you're genuinely able to kind of listen and engage. And it's doing all the work behind the scenes to capture all your notes, your follow-up tasks, where you were mentioned, and you can even use your Copilot after the meeting, which I think people forget. So, you can go back in and ask additional questions. So let's, say your consultant's working with a new client and you need to now write your statement of work. How many workshops did we discuss? Those might not be in the notes. So you might, need to ask questions. So I'll say, definitely, meeting prep, meeting recaps. And by meeting prep, not only like maybe researching your client, having it create that agenda, having it create questions to ask or questions to ask, or the prepared for questions are really good. Managing email, definitely. Content creation, never starting with that blank piece of paper where it can start. I'll say right now, especially, we keep sharing out the PTO prompt with the catch me up. I've been out for a week, like help me get through my emails, my Teams chats, everything that I missed, but prioritize what, is actionable to me that I need to start working on. So I think, yeah, those are some of the bigger categories of ones that we do kind of see over and over again.
I love this PTO prompt. I'm going to have to get it from you and maybe we can put it in the show notes.
And we can put it in the notes. Yes.
So are there areas that specific departments that should start? Say I'm an organization that's just starting to get into this whole Copilot game. Is there a better place to start or does it matter?
I don't know that it matters. It kind of depends on the organization. What I will say is that having a good mix of functional roles, it makes the most sense. We often have groups where they kind of start with IT, and that's not bad, but they don't have the use cases to really be, putting Copilot through the ringer there. So
Right.
marketing, again, we find, is a really successful area for not only using the creativity aspects of Copilot, again, PowerPoint presentations, creating like webinar invitations, doing our blog posts, LinkedIn posts,
Mhm.
our socials, sales, again, the meeting management piece of that, and also like integrations with other systems where then they can like review pipeline and review deals. You could be on with a customer and you can be having Copilot assist you with client information in real time on that call. Human resources, I kind of already mentioned, onboarding, training, hiring processes, benefits management, lots of great opportunity there. And the PMO, like our project managers here use it not only for meeting management, creating status reports, getting all the project recaps and updates out to clients. I mean, if you think about it too, for, any of your listeners that are in consulting, that billable hour can then be repurposed for another client. You're still giving value add, but I'm not typing notes. And again, it's your virtual assistant, not autopilot. So we still need to take those notes and massage those notes and do our due diligence, but it's saving so much time.
Oh my gosh, yes, yes. And I love that these are all that you shared all these use cases, but then at the same time, I've also found resistance to like, oh, well, I got to take my own notes, or should I
Sure.
really let somebody else schedule my meetings for me? And so, it's this struggle I think some people have with adoption and just, saying, okay, it's okay to let go and let this assistant do this work.
Yeah. And I would say, I don't know about you, we're all overscheduled at this point.
Yes,
And,
yes.
and for it just to help, for example, when I'm finished with this podcast, I can assure you I'm going to have like 11 teams chat, 15 emails that come in, but I'm not worrying about that right now. I can
Yeah.
be present with you because I know Copilot is going to help me catch up.
Yeah.
I'll often, again, say that we have a very large tax firm that has rolled out Copilot and similarly go, oh, wait, it's doing my work for me. Well, they want to bring on more clients, and you can't scale to bring on more clients unless we can make you more effective at your work without burning you out. So
Right.
I think of it more strategically about how it is helping me just scale, and again, at the end of the day, you still have the domain knowledge and expertise where you're vetting that researcher agent. You're reading those minute notes. You're being present with your client. Like you as the person are still, being the value add for your organization. This is just augmenting and helping you with your work.
Absolutely. I love that. And it's funny because I liken it to, I'm dating myself here, but back in the day when I would use a Cliff Notes, right?
Oh,
Cliff Notes, right? You felt guilty, but it's okay to use our
for sure. Yeah.
and so or the calculator, right? It's okay. It's okay.
As the foundational tool. And then it's like, oh, you're using the calculator, you're cheating. Or really, it's helping me be more effective in my role. And this is coming from somebody who, if you were to see my office right now, I'm a very paper-driven person. But I honestly, if they took my Copilot away from me at this point, we would have words. Like I not function. I mean, I could, I'm sure, go back
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
before that, but it's and we this space is very busy right now. So I will say our practice is incredibly busy. My calendar is always booked.
Yes. I know because I tried to get on her calendars.
But it allows us to scale, right?
Yes.
We can take on the client engagement and help and be
Yeah.
effective and not get burnt out and still go have a coffee at some point and
Right. Yes. Yes. So, I love, you shared all these great use cases. Have you come across anything that was just like, whoa, I didn't think of that. That's awesome.
We had a couple of those. I actually was talking to my team this morning, mentioning I was doing this, and I was like, "Hey, wait." One brought up their employees started realizing that they can use it because it understands like all your meetings and the projects that you're working on. So it was asking like the self review process about like helping compile, like justify my, oh, wow, for the year. Yes, I know, very creative. I always thought that I think that one's really interesting because it can go back out and be like, here's all the key things you contributed to and like all of the value add you provided for your customer. So that was really interesting. I'll say we find a lot of the innovations in Copilot chat where people start to realize, by bringing the prompt out to the chat instead of doing it in the tool. So same for that same tax firm, like they're able or they are using like PDFs of 1040s and comparing it to financial statements to do their audit reporting and analysis and all of those types of things.
Hmm.
So some creativity and use there. I'll say agents though has kind of like spanned the limits or broadened the limits, I guess, of things that you can do with this.
Yeah.
We had one credit union that came to us and they're like, we wanted to go out and look at like weather and traffic and construction and give us ideas on branch locations that like we can start.
Oh, wow.
I know. And it was looking at demographics and all of those types of things. It was super, super cool. Similarly, we have like some equity firms that are using it to do when they're evaluating clients. Like people are going beyond just let me create that email
Yeah.
to that customer to some pretty interesting and advanced use cases. And again, I think people are learning the conversation of here's what I'm trying to do. How can you
Yes.
help me, Copilot? And then Copilot will be like, oh, well, here's all the ways that I could probably assist you with this that you might not have thought of before. And I say this to customers all the time because I sometimes have people feeling bad. They're like, oh, I could use Copilot for that. I've been in the trenches years now with this. And there are times at the end of the day where like someone on my team will do something. I'm like, oh, I didn't even think of using Copilot.
Right. Yes.
And I think that's also as we're building these up with customers, we're helping customers build out like these communities of practice where they're sharing. We have a Teams channel at Interlink where we're constantly doing Easter egg hunts and dropping in like, oh, we found this new feature, or look, Copilot did this today, or oh, it's here
Yeah.
on this spot. So yeah, just absolutely like fascinating. Just the creativity that's kind of coming into play now that this is available to people, which is kind of neat.
Yeah. And, I actually bring Copilot or any other agent with me to a discovery meeting. And then I go back and review those meeting notes and ask it, what are some creative solutions for the problems that we talked about? And it's really cool to see what it comes up with. And then, it's a great way to start, that's not just a blank sheet, right? Like, okay, what are we talking about here? And then I think another thing is like you've mentioned so many things here or so many use cases. I think it's important to keep a library of those use cases. And so that as others are onboarded or, are questioning something, you could say, hey, here's some ways I've used it before. It's a great selling tool to use.
I agree. Interesting that you say that. So we, yes, for every customer, like we're kind of creating that. We've also kind of not like anonymized it, but we've created
Mhm.
a repository. We've done over 80 Copilot engagements.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. And like, but so we're capturing all those. So like when I go to work with the next law firm, one, I always want to tailor it to the uniqueness of their business because every
Yes.
organization does things a little differently. But I even come to the table with like, I know how to use Copilot with depositions. I know how to use it for a legal review. I know how to do legal research on the web. So like to your point on like getting started, we have some getting started stuff that can like start those creative juices flowing to show like realistic Copilot examples for that person. And then they could be, oh, well, mine might be a little different than that. And then that's how we start to collaborate and work with them on it. But yes, as part of that community of practice, collaboration, best practices for prompting, prompt examples. And also that's where we start to like push out new features and things that are
Right.
also available for sure. Yeah.
Very cool. Well, let's talk about the small guys, right? I mean, some of these organizations that you've mentioned could potentially be smaller organizations, but they might not necessarily have the big IT teams and that support. So what are some things that they should be thinking about? Like, where's a really good place for them to start
Hmm.
this building?
And I would say, so one, always, feel free to reach out to a partner. We're here to help. Like that's, what we're here for, both large and smaller customers for sure. I'd say again, like I was mentioning earlier, on the technical side of the house, Microsoft's making it easier for you via all of these admin centers, which I know then that sounds a little extensive, but you have your Copilot control system, which is kind of like a centralized portal that even frankly a non-technical person can go in there and they can look at, how is adoption going? Are there alerts? Are there, configuration settings, like simple things to, tune up your Copilot?
Mhm.
Your SAM is going to allow you to go in and kind of do some easy reporting and analysis on, SharePoint, oversharing. And then, if you do have, your purview portal, there's a centralized location, and all of these also have Copilot within them. So, you can ask Copilot to be helping you get started with that. But yeah, I would say like there's, from the technical readiness side, that's a good place to get started and kind of work to maybe find that business champion or someone who is maybe more leading in the AI area, that person that's been bugging you for the Copilot license. It's, kind of get them on board and like, have them kind of help, drive some of that change. I'll say again, there's tons of deployment guides and really good resources from Microsoft just to, help you get started. At the same time, for example, we have a webinar like once a month for an hour where we try to like give everybody the updates and give them the guidance where we digest it all down. I'll say, we learned recently there's like 87 different AI skillings just for Copilot. I know, but we're staying on top of those things where we can kind of digest those to get those out to the smaller organizations as well as the bigger organizations. So relying on resources like that as well. There's tons of partners. I'd say Interlink in particular, like we really, want to be out there helping and sharing the knowledge because we know this is a tough place to stay on top of. So there's a lot of change.
Oh, yeah. And it's constantly changing, right? And I think that's why, having a partner is just so important to help guide you, but also to help keep you, in the know and up to date on things. So I love that.
Well,
All right.
yeah, the thing, one thing, and
Go ahead, please.
because we have some that where the objection isn't with the users, the objection becomes on the technical side of the house,
Yeah.
where they're like, we need to get everything all ready before we can deploy Copilot. You're never going to fully have your house in order. And the minute you turn on Copilot, people are creating new content. So it's important to, to be focusing on that, put a good governance plan in place, a good strategy around that. But, you will never be ready if you're going to wait for your Copilot house to be pristine before you look. So
Yes. It's like having children, right? It's like you're never going to be ready. You just gotta do it. We should have shared that analogy or not, but it's that now. Well, thank you so much. This has been so helpful, Rachel. I really appreciate you being on this show. But before we wrap up, I always like to ask my guests if there's one thing you want our listeners to take away from this discussion, what is it?
yeah, and I would say just to reiterate that successful Copilot implementation is really that alignment of people, technology, and process. So you need to think of this as a, comprehensive adoption rollout while keeping the people in mind as part of that. So that part's really important. I will say also to an earlier conversation piece we've had, AI has come to work. Whether you're paying attention to it or not, it's there. We recommend Copilot. It is a secure experience for your users. It's easy to monitor. You have the e-discovery pieces of that. And it is at this point, I would say, a much more mature tool than it probably was like 3 years ago when it first came to market.
Yeah.
So, both of those types of things. But again, at the end of the day, more thinking about the fact that, this digital transformation, is a technology change, but it's also a human change as well. So just kind of keeping those people in mind as you're doing the process.
Love it. Thank you. Thank you. This was such a wonderful conversation. And thank you for leaving us with your insights here. And I can't wait to have you back. Why don't you tell our listeners where they can find you if they wanted to get in touch with you?
Yeah, I would say our easy button, just to remember that, is hello@interlink.com. You can send a note to that email address and they will route you to where we can be most helpful for you.
And you can always contact Minerva at Let's Talk at minervaconsultinginc.com, or you can go to our online home at www.minervaconsultinginc.com. And if you're trying to get in touch with Rachel, I can forward them to her as well. So one last thing I'd like to ask my listeners is to take 3 quick next steps. Number 1, to subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss an episode. Leave a rating and add a comment. Thank you so much, Rachel, for being here. I really appreciate it. And thank you, listeners, for continuing to subscribe and listen.